Welcome everyone to our Wednesday webcast for Montessori leaders and educators. On behalf of the Montessori Foundation and the International Montessori Council, I'm Kathy Leach. I'll be your host today. And we have a wonderful topic and a great panel to join us today. Today's topic is about difficult times. Not sure if any of you have noticed, but there are some difficult times recently. And we're talking about difficult times and calls for leadership, calls for compassionate leadership. And so we're going to have some thoughts about that and share some information based on an article that was written for Harvard Business Review on this very topic. It's a topic that's been heavily researched, so it's not just our feelings in Montessori of love and compassion, but it really does have some good hard science behind it. So we'll be getting into some of that and what we all can do to make sure that we are leading with compassion. So I'm joined today by Montessori Foundation Senior Consultant, Jonathan Wolf. Jonathan is also an IMC board member. Jonathan, thanks for being with us today. Also, Dr. Michael Dorr. Michael hasn't been with us for a while, but we're so happy to have him back. He's been a regular on our panel for many years, and so we appreciate, Michael, hearing from you today and getting an update on what you've been up to. Also joined today by Tanya Reiskin, Associate Head of School at the Newgate School, Lab School of the Montessori Foundation, and also a consultant with the Montessori Foundation, and Dr. Cindy Acker, who's been joining us quite a bit recently, and we're very appreciative. Cindy has helped us in many things. She's leading our social justice task force, also helped with the finance group, and led a cohort in helping schools to navigate through the financial crises that we have been dealing with. So welcome all of you. Thanks for being here, and welcome to all of our attendees. Now, I'm going to take a moment and remind you that the question box is on your control panel. Generally shows up on the right-hand side of your screen, and about halfway down is the question box. Please let us know if you can see us and hear us, because last week people could hear us but not see us. And then we found out that the recording didn't come through. So there was a glitch. We've never had that happen. So let's just get an idea. If a couple of you would just let us know if you can see and hear us. I see Colleen is here and Amy usually here. Go ahead and just let us know. Jeff here, lots of Nervaire, lots of people who generally join us. So you'll know if it's working correctly or not. So perfect. She can see and hear us all good. Oh, this is great. This makes my day. It's the little things in life. When technology works, we can be so appreciative of that. So welcome everybody. So glad that you're here today. So, I think I'll open, since I selected this particular topic. I always like to take a minute, and even before we went live with this panel, to just remind ourselves where we are. Most of us are very rushed. We are running from one meeting to the next, from one obligation, from helping one group of parents or students or staff or whomever is asking for our attention. We go from one thing to the next. And so I just ask everyone to take a nice deep breath and remind yourself where you are. Remind yourself who you're with and why we're here together. I know I'm profoundly appreciative of the people on the panel today and how much they've been helping and supporting me and supporting our organizations through these most recent crises. And I really say most recent on purpose, because crises come and go, and more will come and more will go. For that we know. So in times of uncertainty, I don't know if it's comforting to know that this too shall pass and more will come. So we'll be here now and we'll be somewhere else later, in the words of, I believe, Ram Dass. Okay, so leading with compassion. I have a PowerPoint I'm going to do my best to share with the group. And as I go through, I would just love for the panel to weigh in on some things. And if you have any opening thoughts while I get the PowerPoint set up, we'd love to hear from you just on this, just in general, how does this topic strike you? Okay, so you have to tell me if you can see the screen.
Not full screen yet.
Okay, now you should be able to see it, right?
Yep, it's good.
Okay. So it's the call for compassionate leadership. So in difficult times, we know that there's, as I said, tragedies come and go, trauma comes and goes, difficult times come and go. Currently, we're dealing still with a pandemic, with racial unrest and inequities, I might say. We're dealing with a financial crisis right now. But we know that there are people in our world who are dealing with natural disasters as we speak, that we also, many of our schools have been hit by natural disasters over the past few years, whether it be hurricanes, floods, fires, a number of things have hit our schools. And also you can be assured that in any school community, in any organization, there's always someone who's undergoing some sort of personal tragedy, whether it's illness or death in the family, or a loss of a job, or many, many other things. And so difficult times are here to stay in some respects. And how can we best lead people through those, lead our schools and our organizations through these difficult times? So I'm referring through most of this presentation to an article in the Harvard Business Review. It was an article written actually quite a while ago after the 9/11 tragedy. But Harvard Business Review chose to republish it recently in the summer issue because it applies really to any trauma that we're going through, or any particular sort of hard times or disasters. And I would go so far as to say that many of us feel like we're dealing with a disaster currently. And so when we look at an organization that leads with compassion, a leader who leads with compassion, we have to remember that what we model is what creates the culture in an organization. So if the leader can model and have an organization that is steeped in compassion as a guiding principle, as a container, so to speak, for how people operate and interact, it lessens immediate suffering. So if indeed you're with a group of people and the leader makes it okay to show compassion, immediately it reduces the suffering, whether that immediate person was the one who had the disaster or it was someone in the group or someone outside the group. It enables recovery now, and research shows that it helps people be more resilient in the future. So not only does it give you the wherewithal to get through the current crisis, it builds that muscular memory, if you will, for dealing with that resiliency and dealing with future disappointments and difficult times. And it increases attachment to and among the colleagues, which obviously would give some loyalty to the organization. So the more in sync you are with your colleagues, the more that you are connected with your colleagues, the more connected you would be inevitably to your organization. Any thoughts from the panel on this? I can't see anyone, so you just have to speak up if you do.
I'll speak up. I thought you were looking at it, but you're only seeing your presentation, I suppose.
I'm only seeing my presentation right now. Yep.
Compassion, etymologically, goes back to meaning sharing suffering. Later, it's come to mean having sympathy or having concern or care. But I think that idea of sharing is really an important one, that I will participate with you in your feelings. I can accept them and be part of them. And you know what? I don't think compassionate leadership is limited to difficult times. I think that it's something that if I had my druthers, we'd be practicing continually. Of course, now it brings out a need for us to examine that and for us to look at that and to ask ourselves whether or not we are being compassionate to those with whom we work and to ourselves as well. So I think this is a timely topic anytime. Now it's particularly timely, but I don't think it would be wrong to address this at any time. I'm glad we're on this at this moment.
Michael, thank you for those thoughts. Just to piggyback on that, doing a lot of, like many of you, doing a lot of consulting work in schools, I often see a dichotomy between the compassion we show for the whole child, understanding the needs and tendencies of the whole child, but you don't necessarily see people, the adults, looking at the whole adult. Like, what does the whole assistant teacher need? What are their needs and tendencies, and what are they going through? What is their life experience? We're very attuned to the overall life experience of the child, so that child can be in a place of readiness and motivation to learn. But I see many, many schools looking at people solely through the window of their roles. Well, this is the assistant teacher, this is the lead teacher, this is their job. And you don't hear a lot of conversations, hey, how are you doing with all of this? It's like we are a whole child, but we're not necessarily whole adult. And I think it is the job, as Michael said, it is the job, and Kathy said, the job of the leader to create a culture where we look at the whole family, the whole teacher, the whole board member as we look at the whole child. That, to me, that's a culture of compassion.
You know, hi, Tim. You know, that's an interesting perspective to have there, because I think there's an element in our culture that says my life is in one compartment and my work is somewhere else, and keep them separate. And what you're talking about is saying, no, when you're at work, you're still your whole person. You bring the whole person to work with you. You don't leave the rest of you up in a compartment back at home. And so I think that cultural tendency that is there, and we've all encountered in certain folks, may not be the right thing. I think the right thing is that idea of realizing that whoever you are, wherever you are an entire being. And your emotions, your history, your language, your race, your culture, your ethnicity are all with you everywhere.
Well said. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you both for that, and particularly that, of course, compassion is a choice we make every day. It's a way of life. It's a habit we can cultivate, and it isn't just for difficult times. In fact, it's much harder to apply it if we only try to apply it during difficult times. So I certainly agree with that, with those sentiments. I think that particularly now we want to look at how does it interface with the difficulties we're having? How does it interface with the fear that we have? We talk to school leaders every day, most of us, and what we find is that people are afraid. And so we're called upon yet again, not only to care for our colleagues and the people who we service, whether it be the children or the parents, we're continually called upon as leaders to make decisions, to do difficult tasks, to write letters that we've never had to write before, to make decisions we've never had to make before, and yet we're being called again to show compassion and to create an organizational culture of compassion. So if indeed it's not been a practice, it's a little harder to implement, but it's not impossible. And I think when you look at the benefits long term, the fact what really struck me was in reading about this and the research that surrounds it, that people who are in compassionate environments, that really applies to future opportunities. It increases their resiliency and their ability to show compassion. And that whether they're witnessing or participating in compassionate actions, they benefit from it. So whether you're the one offering compassion and creating a compassionate environment or you're witnessing it, it has a tremendous impact on you now and in the future. And I thought that was profound.
Kathy, I'm wondering whether it's also good to think about what are the contraindicators of a compassionate culture? Is it people just not inquiring into other people's stories, personal, cultural, racial? Is it also people moving to judgment way too quickly about other people And again, I unfortunately see that in way too many Montessori schools among the adults, people not really wanting to hear other people's stories, but also moving very quickly to, judging somebody about their practice in their classroom without hearing their story about their classroom.
Well, I think that's really good. Oh, Cindy, go ahead.
I was going to say that what I think is really interesting is that right now we're also dealing with parallel situations where it may be that the staff is going through all of the different kinds of things that you mentioned were affecting us right now, but the leadership is as well being affected. And so in parallel situations, does it require those in leadership to really pull up? Because they need to be able to feel their own feelings and understand their own situation, but to also be able to reach beyond that to have compassion for others. And there are some people for whom right now they have multi-levels of all of these things that are affecting us right now, where there's racial unrest and there's financial difficulties and there's the backdrop of COVID-19, and all of those things are affecting an individual at one time, and they have to operate in a school setting, and it requires the ability to be able to see beyond what we may not even know, and to exercise compassion.
I would not agree with you more, Cindy. This is an opportunity also for those of you that work in schools that are nonprofit and have a board that is not essentially a small, close-knit family board, to hopefully lead them to a greater level of wisdom and understanding. Because in a situation like this, boards are usually running around in fear. They may be getting highly prescriptive. They may be micromanaging. And whatever we can do to help them to process, it's an opportunity, first off, to help them to do no harm. Secondly, it's an opportunity to help them to grow. And thirdly, it may get you, if you're a leader of a school, to have more support than they've given you in the past.
Yeah, Tim, it's so important that, that this is an organizational, the leader is responsible for setting this tone, but, to get board buy-in, to have parent buy-in, to really be part of the culture of compassion is really important. I'm going to go to the next slide. I started thinking about the witnessing or participating has the same effect. I thought that was really profound, and it contributes to an increased capacity for excellence. So it's almost like when you breathe compassion into an organization, you expand the capacity for excellence. I think that's an amazing thing to think about. And the participation, if you're the one offering and setting the tone, that's one thing, but it also has the same or similar effect on the people who are witnessing that. Tanya, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think it also expands the capacity for understanding trustworthiness and trust.
Yeah.
At the same time, the contraindicator is that it exposes untrustworthiness or doubt or skepticism of the leadership style or the leadership process or past behavior. There's I think the capacity or maybe the rawness of the situation highlights it in a way that it's under a microscope in ways that it might not be when times are more calm.
Interesting point, Tanya, and I think it goes back to what John was talking about, the contraindicators, and thinking about, in difficult times, just like on any individual under stress, sometimes the worst in us comes out, right, or has the opportunity to. And so, being able to look at that and even hold those issues, those problems within an organization or or within a person, to hold that in some compassion is transformative.
So Kathy, what comes to mind for me, and it's really awesome to have Cindy here because she's, founder and head of her school for many, many years. And so she's had a rapport and an experience that is so opposite mine. I mean, this is the very first year in the school community, very first year with parents, I'm getting to know people through this that I'd never met before. And they have no reason to trust me. There was nothing had been started. There were no building blocks laid for some at the moment. And so I think it brings up that this compassionate leadership kind of parallels the flow of the lifespan of a leader, being a leader in an organization. And I think that also for our participants, when you think of your own leadership style, it's important to think about where you are in your organization. If I were back in an organization with a 20-year history, it's a very different process for me than being in the situation I'm now. I have to look at not only individuals, but put things in context when sometimes I don't have the context to understand.
Yeah, Tanya, I'm amazed at how many people we're working with who are either in their first year or have just started a brand new school, their first year in a new school. And the, resiliency that it takes or the persistence, I suppose, that it takes to keep pushing forward. So many people like you have had many years experience in Montessori and in schools, but this is the first year in that particular kind of position or starting a new school. And I'm amazed at their ability to navigate it and to hang in there and stick with it. So.
Right. So do you think, Kathy, that part of it is a compassion for themselves, that when they start with looking within, as this slide suggests, that they're modeling?
I do hope so, that is the case. And I do hope that they find support in the Montessori community. I think that's the thing I've noticed so much over these past months that we've been dealing with this, is that the Montessori community itself has a great deal of compassion and a great deal of support for each other. I know that in the organization that we work in, Montessori Foundation and the International Montessori Council, we would say every organization has its strengths and its challenges. And I will tell you, the thing I'm the proudest of in this organization is the compassion and the grace that we are given to feel what we're feeling and to work through the issues that we're all trying to cope with. And I think to be able to say that about an organization really says a lot. And I for one, appreciate that. And I think that hopefully models for the entire Montessori community that this is the way we want to operate and this is how we want to support each other.
Well, that kind of goes to Michael's original point, that if compassion is built into the culture, then when things reach crisis, people will move, into that mode even more because it's been embedded, it's been seeded in the culture. And I think the way the Montessori Foundation and the IMC have responded compassionately to schools, school leaders, teachers, parents' needs is simply an extension of the way we operate. Michael, sorry, I cut you off.
Well, that's all right. You made some incredibly important points there, but I wanted to go back to something else you said, John, the contraindicators. You were asking about what's the contraindicator to a compassion school, and I think it's dispassion. I think that I don't give a damn about you, that's dispassionate, as opposed to having a real care for you. I don't think the contraindicator is active aggression and so on. It's just not giving a damn. And that's just not human or humane. And yet, I think, and I made this point before, I think we're in a culture that to some extent, not the Montessori culture, but a wider culture that to some extent supports that. You having problems, you have difficulties, you're having this, that, or the other thing, that's your business. Keep me out of it. I don't give a damn. And that I think is actually toxic.
Yeah, yeah, you're right, Michael. That is that I don't give a damn, or the absolute apathy of just not caring. Yeah.
I think perhaps another way that it shows up is neither. It's just being overwhelmed and
Mhm.
being unresponsive. So it's disengagement is another way it shows up.
Yeah. Yeah, and indeed, I don't even think it's intentional. You're right, Tim. And that's, again, back to the indicator, not the contraindicator. This goes beyond empathy, is what the authors of this article talk about. That if leaders take public action, no matter how small that is, but if you can publicly ease people's pain, if you can do something to help the suffering and inspire others to act accordingly. Sometimes easing suffering, sometimes there's nothing, we feel like there's nothing we can do. And sometimes it's just witnessing it. Sometimes it's just acknowledging it, but doing so in a way that is out there. It's public. People know that. Public meaning in our own staff or among our own parents if we're in an organization, whatever public means to that group of people. Because sometimes we can't fix it. Obviously, if we could have fixed this COVID thing, oh my gosh, wouldn't we all have done that? We can't do that. But what can we do to help alleviate suffering?
One of the things that probably should be looked at, if it hasn't already been spoken about, and I apologize for arriving late. It's very hot outside, and I was checking on the dogs, and they're fine. They say hello, the other dogs. Is many of us as Montessori school leaders find that the people that work with us look to us to give them comfort and safety and parenting. And it's as if they're dependent. And I've always argued that our role as Montessori leaders is like a really good Montessori guide, which is not to be constantly stroking and rewarding and praising, but rather really being there to help them to, I call it, find their own voice, to feel that they have unconditional support from us to work really hard, to find their own way of solving a problem, of learning to be more graceful and kind. But it's what Nancy Rambusch called authoritative leadership, which is firm at the edges, empathetic at the heart, but ultimately supportive without literally allowing other people to drain us dry. Because many Montessori school leaders in good times talk about feeling how the parents and the teachers exhaust them.
It's an interesting point. It's an interesting point you make, Tim, about the balance between compassion and independence. I know of some school leaders who continually sit in year after year in difficult parent meetings, in like parent-teacher conferences. Like, I'll sit in this meeting and coach you through it, and it's very compassionate. It's like, I don't want you to be stressed about this difficult parent conference. But what they've left out of the equation is, what have you learned by my mentoring? Because next year I expect you to do this on your own. It's that same level of independence that we expect of children. So I think one could argue that true compassion leads to greater proficiency and greater independence. Cindy, I think I cut you off.
I was just going to say that I think that we're going to really see the need for paying attention to how we lead with compassion this school year, like perhaps none of the past few school years. And there's an expression that comes from Africa that has to do with coaching people, that you hold someone on your back until you get across the river. And then when you get across the river, then you let them down and then they can go. And it's not enabling, it's just supporting just so. And it reminded me of when I went to Jamaica a number of years ago, and I was lost, and I was on a bus with my children, and my son was like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old at the time, and the buses were really small and packed with people and no place to hold on and very few seats. And we were traveling through a town, and everybody with me was starting to fall over. All of the Jamaicans seemed like they had navigated the bus system just fine. But there was this older woman who saw that I was having difficulty and that I was trying to figure out how to get where I was going and how to navigate myself in the bus and my children. And she just took my child and set him on her lap. She didn't say anything to me. She just lifted him up and put him on her lap. And he was looking totally shocked. He stared at me, and I looked like I knew her and that all was well, because I didn't want to scare him. And I thought, this must be something that is customary here. And when it was time for me to get off of the bus, she handed him back and she walked off, and that was that. And it was just the support that I needed in the moment. And I couldn't think of anything else. I couldn't sort out what to do. I couldn't sort out where to go. And I couldn't sort out how to hold on. And she just did that. And I think that that's a part of what we're going to be needing to hold for our staff this year, is that we have to be able to not, when it said beyond empathy, it's not just putting yourself in someone's shoes and trying to feel what they feel, but we're going to have to step beyond that and to be able to just coach enough to be able to help them over to the other side, and so that they can keep doing what they do best.
Beautiful story, Cindy. I love your stories.
Yeah.
Really, that's really interesting. It gives me a lot to think about as I consider how we'll be helping people with this. And I've moved on to the next slide, and it really speaks to me as a Montessorian about preparing environments. How do we prepare our environment for the adults? How do we prepare an environment that allows for and encourages and supports compassion from all levels? And again, I'm referring to this article that talks about context for meaning and context for action. Do we prepare an environment that allows people to process whatever this trauma or tragedy is? Do they have an opportunity to process it, to express their feelings, to talk about it? Or do we say, no, put everything behind you and now you're at work and it's only about the children? And I have to say, in the 40 some years I've been in Montessori, I'm sure I've said that sometimes. And I think about, and I don't think I was a discompassionate leader, but at the same time, I think, there's a difference between, being able to bring yourself to be fully present in the moment you're in, and also making room for what we're all going through collectively right now, just as far as the processing piece. And then the action piece is, do we allow for people to help each other? I often talk about classrooms where children are encouraged not to help each other. Montessori classrooms that we say, well, of course, compassion and helpfulness is a value in a Montessori classroom, yet we tell the children who come rushing over to help the little one who just spilled all the beans on the floor, that's his work. He has to pick that up. Go back to your work. It's not your business. We totally push them away instead of acknowledging, thank you for being helpful. Maybe you can choose one friend to help you, and encouraging that. But how do we do it at the adult level? How do we back up and say, what kind of systems and processes in place do we have in place in our organizations to help a family who's going through a tragedy, or again, these collective tragedies we're going through right now? How do we set it up that we're actually helping each other, that we're taking action, no matter how small?
Mhm.
A lot to think about.
Mhm.
But preparing our environments really, we spend so much time and so much energy and so many resources on preparing environments for children, physical environments. I challenge us to think about the emotional environments that we're creating, and are we holding those up to be compassionate environments?
Mhm. Mhm.
So I have a
I know.
quote. Oh, go ahead, Cindy.
I was just going to say that I know that this year we're probably going to have staff who are concerned about being at school, and they have older parents at home who might be 80, 90, and that they're concerned about the virus and how that might impact them, or other kinds of situations that may affect people who are in their household. And I think it's just going to be an important piece for us to be able to look at, because not everybody is going to be able to easily just turn that off. And they're going to need some time or some space or somewhere to be able to sort that out.
Yeah,
So,
and how do we do that? Go ahead, John.
I was just going to, Cindy, thank you for bringing that up. What comes to mind is, how do I as a leader, or do we as leaders of schools, how do we create a safe container for people to be able to work these personal issues through, so their minds can actually be free to be thoroughly present in the classroom with children? That unless I create a prepared environment for people to process this stuff, they're not going to be completely mindful with the children. And it is my job as leader to hold them to that accountability, but that's going to have to create, I'm going to have to create some kind of an environment where they can work these things through with support of their colleagues.
Yeah.
I think this is such an important issue you bring up. At this moment, I have not met many people who are leading Montessori schools where any significant number of people have really become profoundly ill or lost their lives, whether the individual or a close family member. If things keep going, we're going to start seeing that happening more and more often. And the stress level is going to go through the roof for those people. And it's going to have incredible impact on the faculty, on the stress of parents who hear about it or who might themselves be going through it, and of course, on the head of school. So one of the things that we really want to think about is, we ourselves need to not only be prepared to lead with empathy, we need to really prepare ourselves with whatever practices work for us, prayer, meditation, support groups, whatever, to be able to deal with waves of stress from us and from others around us like nothing we've seen, except those of us who've run schools through wartime.
Yeah. So I've selected a quote here from this article, which we will put the link in for you. Says, "We have found that those who excel at leading compassionately and effectively in times of crisis adhere to a set of shared practices that help people make sense of terrible events and allow employees to move on." So what they referred to is that the more organizations tried to tamp down and not let these things into the workplace, the lower productivity and morale, and you know, the lower those went, the higher absenteeism went, and other things that perhaps weren't conducive to the success of the organization. Whereas these people who actually put these practices into place actually gave the people. So how do we do this? Is this shared set of practices that the quote referred to really started with each of us modeling and practicing compassion every day, compassion for ourselves, compassion for others in our typical daily interactions, to share feelings, to be able to model that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay for us to share that, this is difficult, or we've been afraid, or we're concerned about children's health, or we're concerned about our finances of our school or organizations, it's okay to share things without dumping on the employees. We have to be very careful. It is still a fine line that we can't make our problems their problems, right? We're not expecting them to take those on, but to share in a way that there is a commonality in the collective experience. To be present both physically and emotionally for people makes a significant difference. That is a practice that matters to people every day. Symbolism, to continue on with things that are rituals and traditions in our organizations, because that brings comfort to people. The article specifically referred to after 9/11, people feeling like really good about being able to sing the national anthem or see a flag flying, and it just brought up like, we're going to be okay. It was the symbolism, it was the traditions and the rituals that helped people heal. And the last thing it talked about was allocating resources. Are there resources that we need to reallocate, whether it be time, whether it be somebody needs an extra break during the day, whether it be maybe we need to do meals for a family that's struggling? Do we need to, just reallocate? How do we use our resources to best support people who are processing tragedy and difficult times?
Can I get a word in here? I just want to say something. Thank you I wanted to say something else, but what you just said moved me. I'm still going to say that something else, but I think that part about ritual and tradition is really, really important. I think that gives us something concrete to hold on to. It's why, among other reasons, people value going to funerals, for example, or weddings, because that's a ritual, it's a tradition, and even though it's a funeral, it validates life. And the idea of having rituals in the school, if you don't have any, it's important to create them, to set up traditions. And if they aren't traditional, well, it actually doesn't take long to create a tradition with young children. And that they very soon will believe that this is just part of what we've always done here. And I think those kinds of things are critical. Anyway, by the way, let me just put in a plug for my favorite subject, which is, I think stories have a place in all of this too. Sorry, Tanya, you knew I was going to say that, but
I'm going to add sharing feelings.
Telling our story, sharing your story, listening to one another's stories and validating those is part of what makes things digestible, if I can say that. And in the telling of this story, we work our way through it. None of that was what I was originally going to say. I think that the phrase that I found most important in that slide you showed, not this one, but the one before that, that slide said, a set of shared practices. Yeah. So I'm getting out of that, it's not good enough for me to be compassionate. What's needed is for all of us to have a set of shared practices that become part of our culture, that become part of our raison d'etre. It's how we do things here. And that idea of a shared set means that we have a cultural shift maybe that we might have to make in our schools for all of us to share this set of compassionate standards that we now adhere to.
And I was going to, why I love Michael's stories, John's story, we all are storytellers. And one of the things that John and I do frequently in our workshops is use the technique of recall a time when. And I think that shared practices and having an opportunity for a group of people, whether it be a faculty meeting, of recall a time when, and it could be, when we packed up the school for a hurricane, or it could be something fun or light. But I think that level of engagement is going to really be important to remember not only where we are being present, but recalling a time when we pulled ourselves together emotionally and physically in a shared experience and what did we learn from it? I think that's what's going to be really powerful this year as we approach the school year. What did we learn from something that we all have in common?
Michael, I want to piggyback on what you said, and thank you for focusing in on shared practices. One of the phrases I've been using in some of my consulting work with schools is, does your school have a Montessori constitution that people refer to, a touchstone, being defined as, have you come up with a portrait of the graduate or a vision of human potential? Have you really defined what you mean by normalization? So that could be one shared agreement, shared practice. Like, what kind of human beings are we developing here, since we're in the human being development business? Do we have a set of social norms for the faculty? Grace and courtesy for the adults, how we're going to support each other, communicate, build productive relationships. Have we defined the essential elements, or what Tim likes to say, fully implemented Montessori elements at every program level? What is our definition of Montessori at every program level? I know some schools that have done a vision of the Montessori guide. If we were to attract the perfect Montessori guide, what would they look like in character and proficiency? The vision of the parent, the vision of leadership at our school. The more these agreements are iterated and agreed upon and practiced, the more you have a set of shared practices that become invaluable in times of stress and crisis. So thank you, Michael, for that point.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Okay. So the compassionate organization, of course, believes we're all in this together, right? And we've all been saying that all through this crisis. We really are all in this together. And I think the pandemic, of all of the events that I've had happen in my lifetime, the pandemic really brought that home, that, you know, anywhere you were on the planet, you were experiencing very similar circumstances. And so that, you know, really helped us realize that, you know, this is a very small planet and we really are all in this together. But the more a school community or a small organization can feel that, the better. Values driven, of course, we've talked about that a little bit. Are we addressing people's basic needs? Do we address their basic needs and their grief? Do we look at, you know, how our organization can support people who are struggling, who are in our community? How do we do that? And that these practices are encouraged, and Michael talked about this too, encouraged among and between all the members. So while the leader has the obligation, I believe, to set the tone, to model and practice on a regular basis, to develop this compassionate practice and being, we want to encourage and support it among everyone so that it becomes just the way that we operate. And I think John spoke to that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on that?
I think that if I could just get a word in quickly here, that this is entirely congruent with Montessori's cosmic vision, with what she saw as a cosmic vision that is, in one way, her idea of a pathway to peace and a pathway to inner peace, but also a pathway to a peaceful world. And part of that is exactly what we've been speaking of, this respect and care for all other beings, and the idea of having a purpose in one's life, that one has a purpose and meaning in one's life, which she happened to call a cosmic task. These are ideas that I think are implicit in everything we do, and maybe should be made more explicit in what it is that we do, because cosmic stuff has been thought by many people to be the purview of elementary educators, and that's not how it's meant. It actually belongs to Montessori in general, and particularly at a time when we're dealing with what I would think of as cosmic issues right now. So I really think that it goes to the heart of what makes Montessori Montessori.
Michael, you just said something that I want to piggyback on. Kathy, could you go back to that prior slide for a moment?
Well, we'll see if that works, John. Give it a try.
We can go backwards in time, if that's possible. So under that third bullet, address basic needs, and maybe what I'm about to say comes under basic needs, but I'm wondering also in the spirit of developing a culture of compassion, whether we need to be more interested in learning about people's strengths, their passions. I mean, Michael used the term cosmic purpose. It's the schools that I've worked with where people are really interested in developing everybody, adults and children's core strengths, talents, what they're passionate about. You build a tremendous level of trust in those schools. And then the other thing that I think could come under basic needs here is, are we really interested in people's life and career aspirations? Do we turn to our assistant teachers and go, so where do you see yourself in 5 years? What are you interested in doing down the road? Because we'd love to support you. So it's being interested in people's futures, I think, is another aspect of compassion.
Yeah, good point. Good point, John. Okay, so measuring. One of the things that, we don't normally measure compassion, right? It's not one of those things that we get the tape measure out and measure. But these are some things to think about as we assess our current organization and how it's working. And think about the scope. What's the breadth of things that we can offer people who are having difficult times, whether it be individually or as the current situation is collectively? Do we have the opportunity to be flexible, as I said, with work schedules? Can people share vacation time? Can we offer flexible hours or gestures of comfort like food or flowers or just kind words? What's the breadth of these things? And when it comes to scale, we're looking at the volume of, well, how much can we do really? And how much can we do organizationally? And it does not always, people stop and think almost always when I talk about these things about money. It's not just about money. It's really about thinking outside the box and thinking about how do we support each other. And it doesn't always come top down. What we want to do is allow for it to emerge in our organizations. And then the scale does become much deeper and broader. Speed. How quickly can we respond, or do we need a nudge, right? Because we're so busy in our own world that we didn't realize that there's people in our organization suffering in some way. And so the speed with which we can respond and notice things and know what can happen. And again, not only top down. If this is a culture of encouragement at all levels, the speed will be ramped up just by its very nature. And specialization really is about, can we be, let's say, specific about if there's a family who needs something and one family needs one response, another family needs one response, but we only have one response. We just send cards to everyone, right? Or we just send flowers to everyone no matter what is happening. That's not necessarily specializing on how we can best meet that particular family or staff member or child's needs.
I think the counter indicator to that, since John, you often speak of counter indicators, I think the counter indicator for that is that, well, if I do it for you, I'd have to do it for everybody. And that is poisonous, because we're not all the same by any matter of means. And if I do it for you, I might do something different for John. And that's because he's John. And that's the way it is, that I find that counter indicator to be so common that people make that comment.
It's that second plane.
Just let me finish, John. They actually bring it into their way of life, the way that they deal with others. And that what we're really talking about is treating each person as an individual human being. That's what needs to be thought of, regardless of how you dealt with another person, that each individual is their own self. I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry to cut you off there, Michael. It's that defaulting to that second plane of development elementary mantra. Well, that's not fair. Who said things are fair? They need to be equitable and individualized, but it's not fair.
It speaks to the difference between equality and equity.
Yeah.
And I think that's a significant difference that we all should bear in mind.
Well, and that applies to so many things, doesn't it? Indeed, it does. This is the article that informed a lot of what the presentation was about today, Leading in Times of Crisis. and it's available at Harvard Business Review, and it was republished again summer of 2020. I am going to turn that one off so I can see all of you again, all of the panel. And because I wasn't able to see any of the questions in the box today, I'm going to look. Well, Colleen Carlson has a comment. The pandemic isolation has exacerbated the grief of people in all with the lack of supports needed during such times normally. The isolation, I think the impact is not even yet all the way felt on how, I mean, we're doing the best we can. And I think it really is affecting some people more than others. And the ability to reach out in the ways that we're used to have been compromised. So we do have to look at it differently and think about it differently.
Mhm.
I think that is so true. I mean, the whole thesis of the article is so brilliant, and the reality that all of us will be swimming in is like being in a Pacific Ocean offshore where there are cross currents. We're going to be pulled in lots of directions really fast. And we're going to be dealing with hard decisions we have to make, parents that challenge decisions we have made, people that want to know exactly what we're doing when we really don't know yet what we're doing, hard decisions about what do we do with limited resources and how do we help one another if we're experiencing intense emotion, whether it's elation or despair or exhaustion or grief or fear. This is just going to be living in interesting times. And the ultimate message to me of what Kathy and John and others have chosen to speak about this week is this is a time when we really need to hold each other's hands, be as kind as we can, and remember that the greatest and highest purpose of Montessori is the mental health aspect of it, the creation of a safe space. And nothing we do is going to make everything safe because the world at the moment is not safe. But what we can do is help each other to get through it.
Most definitely. Cindy, I want to thank you because I think that over the course of this, I don't know, last month or so, and we've really been called to address the racial inequities that we've been dealt with, that you have led some conversations that are exceptionally difficult and with such grace and compassion that has given us the opportunity to be who we are, to learn at our own pace, and to just to hold each other in compassion. And the tone of those conversations is so decidedly compassionate and open, because there are just different opinions and there are questions that are hard and there are, there's no easy answers. And I just want to express my gratitude for how you have done that for us. And it did help inspire my thoughts about today's topic. So I thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You see,
Let's see, somebody's asking about the article. It was in the Harvard Business Review, hbr.org, I think it is.
Yeah, it's hbr.org.
Yeah. And then is the Leading in Times of Crisis article you referred to the same? Oh, yes, it was Leading in Times of Trauma, Dutton and Kahn. Yes, that's the same article. Yes, Panov.
Kathy?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's another article that I'd like to recommend that's on the same topic, but a little different spin. It's the article from Harvard Business Review from several years ago called The Work of Leadership by Heifetz and Laurie, Heifetz and Laurie, The Work of Leadership. It's the story of how to guide compassionately an organization through an adaptive or real transformative change because of changing conditions, whether it's economic conditions or health conditions or environmental conditions. The work of leadership, also in alignment.
And Jonathan, I think that one was just republished in the summer 2020 issue as well. I think they just did a sort of compendium of leading in times of crisis and
Oh, good.
of their best articles over a period of time. And so that was one of them as well. Really, really well done. And Heifetz, one of our favorite authors, that's the adaptive leadership, right? He's done that and certainly done a lot of work in that area as well. So absolutely recommend that. Just want to thank everyone today for coming. We are at the end of our time. We do look forward to seeing everyone again on Friday for our town hall at 3 o'clock, where we will again be dealing with racism, both systemic and internal, and doing our own internal homework, as well as learning from Dr. Acker and some of the historical things that have helped us. We really appreciated the lesson on Juneteenth last week. It was moving, educational, and certainly I think stayed with all of us. We will forever look at that day differently, as we should. So thank you for that. Thanks, John, Tanya, Dr. Michael Dorr, thank you so much. Dr. Cindy Acker and Tim, thanks everybody for today, and we will see you next week. Okay, recording's off. And I know everyone can hear us, so I'll just go ahead and say that and remind all of you if you wanted to have any misbehaviors. Because, you know, we have to keep you guys in line sometimes. I never have to worry about that.
Like my personal medication.
Well, I do appreciate all of your sense of humor and your kidding around with each other, and I do appreciate you being here. And Michael, it's great to have you back.
Yep, good to see you.
And Rose are doing well. And
Thank you.
I know it's hard to be by yourself up there in that Minnesota area.
That's right. Even though we have exceeded the temperature in Tampa a couple of days in the last week.
Have you?
Really?
Yeah, when we're in the middle 90s, and it's for us Minnesotans, that's relatively intolerable.
Yeah.
I know, Cindy, it sounds strange, but that's the way it is.
Oh, no, for Californians as well, because we don't believe that there's anything beyond like 70 and 50. So.
The thing about Minnesota is we're on both extremes.
The temperature.
We're way below 50 some of the time and way above 70 some of the time, but that is the sweet spot. You're right.
Temperature here is supposed to be 104 outside.
Oh my God.
God.
Yeah, it's really hot down here.
That's
why
too hot to even get in the pool.
That's what you were checking on the dogs.
We'll stay in the air conditioner.
Making sure they were okay.
Yeah, that's intense.
I hope each of you are doing okay and halfway through the week hanging in there. And I'm definitely looking forward to
I
seeing
want to thank
Friday.
I want to thank Cindy and John for recommending Sapphires.
Oh, you
That
watched.
was just,
Yeah, if you
I
haven't
mean-
seen the film, you haven't seen the film Sapphires.
I have not seen that yet.
talk about compassion.
Inspiring
And have-
movie.
I mean, talk about compassion.
Yeah.
That was like, I need to see it again, because there just were so many beautiful moments in that movie that were just exquisitely done.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
I'm
I
ready
told
for-
John next time he needs to invite me to dinner too.
Oh, we
Okay, there.
I'm not going to say. I'm not going to say.
a dinner movie party, right?
I'm not going to say menage a trois with Cindy and Tanya and me watching the film together. But we can all watch the film together.
Only Jonathan. Okay, I'm glad the recording's off. And with that, I'm going to leave you all to your imaginations. Okay.
There you go.
All right. Have a great week. See you all Friday. Well, see some of you
Okay.
on.
All right. Bye.
Kathy, you stopped the recording, right?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Michael, why don't you stay on for a minute, because it's so rare I see you. Let's just catch up.
Okay.
Okay. And I think I can get out and not turn it off, right?
Kathy, you and I should talk sometime soon too.
We definitely need to catch up, Michael.
There's a number of things. So not the least of which is that what is that chapter in that
And that
That's-
chapter, and then there's the course.
well, there's that too. That's what
Pro
Tim
quo
wants
thing.
What
Okay,
course is?
okay, we'll talk.
Uh,
I gotta see if I can log off without
to talk about.
turning
You
you
might
guys.
cut us off when you do that.
I
Yeah, I don't.
doubt it because I signed in as the way I
Okay,
usually
well,
do.
I'll just leave it on because I'm gonna go out and get some coffee and some water, get ready for my next meeting. Have fun.
Which is 3 o'clock, right?
Yes, sir.
See
All
you
right,
then.
Julie, I have a meeting coming up very shortly with somebody you may know called Robin Howe.
Yes, and tell Robin how Chantal Walters is trying to reach him. And if he
Okay,
doesn't have time, let me know and I'll work with her.
okay.
I was actually
We're
tempted.
talking about Sarasota University, but what's up, Tim?
Oh, nothing. Just checking on how you are. How's everything going? How's the Chesapeake program running?
Well, it's been nuts. First of all of my consulting work that is my income, basically, that I live on, has dried up. So who needs a school consultant when you don't even have school?
Mhm.
So all of a sudden, that's been a little bit of a strain, is trying to figure out how to deal with that issue. I am teaching a course. I just finished teaching a course for Virginia for the Chesapeake program, virtually online, on Montessori theory, and I'm going to do another one next week on storytelling for them. Those are short courses, 2 or 3 days, but it helps. And I'm doing a course with Sarasota University on cosmic education that started today, which I intend to morph into a course for the IMC Foundation, except without some of the onerous assignments that are in there because it's a graduate level course there.
Yeah.
But I've been doing well, and you just had a birthday last week, didn't you?
Did.
Yeah.
And next year, this time, it's going to be an even bigger birthday.
That's right. That's right. I've got a little ways to go for that one, but I'm looking forward to celebrating that one and many more thereafter. I was just thinking that this next year, 2021, will be what looks to you like only a very little time, but 50 years of me being involved in Montessori as a certified Montessori guide. And I'm thinking I'd like another 50 years of doing this.
I agree. Colleen Carlson has just sent me a text saying she can see and hear us.
Oh,
And I'll tell you in a minute.
well, Colleen, I'm glad I didn't say anything, use any bad
No, I
words.
knew there were people still online listening. That I always found it fun to eavesdrop on conversations like this in Montessori. Kind of get a sense of your future. You're listening to people talking. I'd say let's get foundation courses up and running quickly because for the first 3 months of Bye Hunt, Michael Dorr says hello.
Hello.
Hello, goodbye.
Ooh,
Be
is
safe.
that Joyce back there?
Yeah, she is going to pick up one of our giant dogs.
Well, if that's Joyce, say hi to her. And I see it looks like a
One of the
dog's
Maltese.
head sort of down there, a little bit of a dog's head down under your left arm.
Yes, this
there
is
we go.
Dharma.
There we go.
Dharma likes to snuggle, and the brother is laying comfortably over here.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think all dogs, well, maybe that's too inclusive, but lots of dogs like to snuggle, but some of them, like my 60-pound black lab, is a little bit big to want to crawl into my lap, but she wants to do it anyway. She hasn't quite occurred to her that this is something that maybe is more properly in a tinier dog.
I used to raise Great Danes, and we still have Shepherds and a giant Bernese mountain dog, and they all do that.
Yeah, having seen your house, I know that you have
Anyway,
a large number of beautiful animals.
I would suggest, from what I can tell, people are absolutely hungry for one, your course on managing your elementary curriculum. And they would also be really hungry, I'm sure, for whatever you're planning on cosmic education. Hey, hush up, you bunny. And I think there's real interest in learning how to be more effective in doing either blended learning or online learning. Not necessarily that that's what you would want to teach about, but I sense real hunger for those out of everyday teachers.
Yeah, and Tim, I need to go to the so-called drip schedule and set this course up that's already there, our course on You Can Teach It All. I want to get that started in August. I've told you that. I wanted to be able to lap into, there's a number of things I want to do that I ask them to go into the classroom and go into the classroom and try this, go into the classroom and try that. So you lose out on that if it, I found out last summer, you lose out on that when you run it during the summertime. That I want you to try this and then report back to us when we converse. How did this work? Well, you can't do that if you're not in the classroom.
Absolutely
So
right.
starting August, it would get into the school year. And that's, I too am getting a number of people writing to me asking if I'm going to run that course again. So I know there's a demand out there. And I want to do it. I absolutely want to do it.
Well,
The
the other
cosmic
thing that,
course I also am doing right now, but I'm inventing it as I go along. Each week, I'm about 1 week ahead of the students. And each week I'm recording a new presentation, a new video, and we're trying to talk about the whole idea of Montessori's cosmic vision, of course, at the elementary level, but also at primary and secondary, and also the cosmic adult. People like you and me, have we abandoned being cosmic because we're grown-ups? I don't think so. So that's what I want to talk about in that course, what I am talking about in that course. I think you're mute there.
I was muted because Bunny is howling that her mother left. So she's just sitting there, just howling at the moon or something. The other course that I think would do really well, that we could either do together with very little planning, doesn't have to be pre-recorded, would be a course in the structure of Montessori curriculum. Cutting across ages, in other words, the big broad theory of what are you really looking at when we talk about curriculum, and how do we understand how children progress through it, and the whole issue of expectations and freedom and noticing what the child does voluntarily, that whole issue of balance. I think something that people might be very interested in, because they have this window of time where they're trying to decompress after the stress of the summer, spring, and they want to learn something. And a lot of people want to learn pretty simple things, but I think there are people that want to learn more complex things. And some of them are things that you and Robin, you alone, you and I, you and Kathy would do really well together.
I think that's an intriguing idea. Don't you already have, though, a curriculum theory course that was created a few years ago?
We have a course you created that you called curriculum, and it's free. And every once in a while, I see someone sign up for it. I'm assuming that these are basically recordings of webcasts that you did. And I'm assuming that because it's an invisible course, that you're telling students that if you want to see those webcasts, go in there. Either that or it's secret arcane knowledge being passed around among Montessorians.
I think that's likelier, but I thought there was an actual course, and I'm forgetting who it was that is the person that was teaching curriculum theory. It slips my mind right now, that I had proposed having a formal course on curriculum theory. I mean, looking
Sharon,
at
it was years
that's
ago.
right. Sharon was doing it. That's right. So
Mhm.
is that course something that is still available, or was it available, or are we talking about looking at it differently?
We're looking at doing it differently. The course you're talking about was the course that we still have called an overview of Montessori philosophy and curriculum. And that's really more like what you would teach in an introductory teacher education course. And it's it's not updated. It was originally written back in 2003. It's based around my book, The Montessori Way. Sharon was moderating it for me, moderating the discussion, and she had some really interesting ideas and thoughts. And that's still out there, but this would be something very different.
I think so. I think so. You know, when I talk about curriculum, I like to have some basic ideas, but then we can apply, I mean, that are talked about by curriculum folks, whether they're in Montessori or not, but then apply them to Montessori and think, what does it mean when they talk about vertical integration, for instance? What does that mean to us as Montessori people? So I'd like to do that. I'd like to sit down and try to figure out what would that look like?
Yeah, I don't think it would be difficult at all if we're not trying to pre-record it.
Well, if it were live, if it were live, like a lot of the stuff that John does, I think John and Tanya have done some live bits that are something that occurs maybe 5 Tuesdays in a row or something like that.
Exactly.
That sounds to me like something that's exceptionally doable.
And then we just record it and we store it. And so the person who goes to New Hampshire on vacation can see it at their own convenience, and you leave live, the chat keeps going so that every once in a while you and I get an email from one of your earlier cohorts where someone's made a comment or asked a question. And I know I typically will jump in and say something like, well, Dr. Dorr may want to add his own thoughts, but here's my thoughts. I keep those things running. But no, this is not intended to be evergreen. It could become a evergreen if we do it enough times and we get it in our heads that we think that makes sense. But I'm thinking live, real time. And for those of us who do a lot of work normally in the field consulting, to me, the logical replacement is these courses.
Well, I think that's really, I haven't done that as a live thing, and I look forward to I look forward to it. I like the idea. With this course I'm doing for Sarasota right now, we meet weekly on Zoom. We also have a lot of other stuff, recorded stuff, but that weekly stuff has become meaningful to them. They really like that idea of being face to face and asking a question and getting an answer right now. Right now. Sometimes they follow that up with an email that says, here's a question I didn't want to ask, but would you deal with this? I think that idea of the personal connection, and on something like Zoom, you see each other. It's not like our webinars. You actually get to see each other, which I think gives them a real sense of connection. It gives me that sense. It gives me the sense that I'm connected to the students. So I want to sign on. I'm ready.
One of the things I can do is send you the syllabus of a course that I wrote years ago that John and I delivered live for a number of years. And it may give you a beginning structure idea. You've taught curriculum in your own way in different settings. The stuff I do tends to be oriented to school leaders or to curriculum coordinators or people who are far enough along in their development that they're trying to, they don't want to graduate credit. They don't want to do a lot of writing and assignments, but they want to come away with a fresh perspective.
Mhm.
Best way of saying what I've noticed over my career. And I'll send you Master Teachers Model Programs, which is interesting because I'm not suggesting we literally do that course, because that's everything from recruiting staff, interviewing staff, hiring staff, supervising staff, the whole thing about staff. And then the other half is curriculum and how do you get beyond the idea that because someone has a diploma, that their understanding of curriculum is the same. And how do you really think about curriculum from Montessori perspective? You and I have done a lot of this in weekly webinars.
The part about hiring staff, managing staff, overseeing staff, et cetera, is not in my wheelhouse. That's not my special area that I'm good at. I am good at thinking about implementing describing curriculum, defining curriculum, connecting curriculum with actual practice in the classroom and in the school. Whether it's the school leader, the curriculum specialist or coordinator or whatever, or the classroom teacher, or actually anybody in the classroom. But those bigger board issues and supervisory issues are more things that you are good at, Tim, that I am not going to pretend that I'm good at that particular area. I've focused in my life on these classroom issues to a great extent. So if we're going to talk about it, I would be able to chime in with some knowledge.
Well, I think there should be something that complements your managing the elementary curriculum. I think it should be something that ideally covers the broadest possible age span of Montessori students, as opposed to the elementary program, which is really specifically for the 6 to 12 age range. I think it should help them to think about accountability, decisions about whether to use learning activity packets or quote work plans, and journaling and student initiated projects, and your idea of the follow-up, more in-depth work, and the place of lessons at any age level. For example, I continue to see people at early childhood giving a presentation to 2 kids and spending 30 to 45 minutes doing something. And to me, that's just not a good idea.
No, that's to me, that's a mark often of the new to Montessori teacher, the person who's new to Montessori, who gets into the program and sort of sings, let the world go away, and gets with 1 kid or 2, and might even, on an extreme basis, present this presentation with her back turned to the whole class. And, I'm so into it with you, and that leads to the idea that we could talk about some fundamental management ideas as well. Like, you cannot sit with 3-year-olds for 45 minutes and expect that you're going to be effective. That is just absolutely absurd. And once the children are on their back and their feet and arms are waving in the air, you've lost it. And to try to get the assistant to come around and prop them up and sit them up so that they'll pay attention is an admission of defeat. You can't do that. And some people don't know that. They kind of think, well, if they would only pay more attention, things would be better. It doesn't work that way. So there's curriculum and there's also practice.
Yes.
And
all
you can talk till hell freezes over about curriculum, but if I'm going to deliver it in that manner, it's not going to work.
Yep.
I think
Well-
Kathy has re-entered. Kathy is once back and she's here.
Well, Kathy can log out anytime. She's using my GoToMeeting class. She is sitting in the computer and she can jump off or stay in.
Well,
I
and
think,
you have lots of people still listening into, your virtual meeting here. I know. Just so they know,
Are there still people
they
sitting?
know, you know.
yeah.
I don't know. See, I only get to see Kathy, Michael, and Tim. Those are the only people I get to see. So if there's other people out there, hi. I didn't
There's
know.
lots of other people out there. Okay.
Why don't I do this, Michael? Why don't I prepare a Google document and get it started for a syllabi of a course of undetermined length that would address the aspects of curriculum and practice that we're talking about. And let's try to flesh it out and see when you want to launch it. I think with 2-3 weeks notice, we should be fine. Now, one thing that's different is Kathy has really got a little team that's looking at what courses are rolling out and trying to avoid, 3 or 4 classes on the same topic happening at the same time, so they all cancel each other out.
Mhm.
But we have not talked about anything quite like this. I know Kathy wants you to do the cosmic curriculum course, the new one.
And I made a promise.
Yep. And I'm just kibitzing with another possibility because depending on your bandwidth, I think there's room for 3. You don't want to teach, you can manage it all until August. So you need to get me any changes you want in description and the dates and the times so we can start promoting it. Because that course you want as much promotion as possible.
Yeah, that course is going to fill up because I've got a backlog of people that are asking about it, and but it's limited. It's an elementary program. Whereas what we're talking about is more across. And I think I'm able to talk about curriculum and planning and implementation from 3 to 18. But before three, those kids that are from birth to 3 years old, that's in Kathy's wheelhouse, not mine.
I first agree with you.
I did teach toddlers for 1 year, and that 1 year taught me something, which is that I'm not good at teaching toddlers. or maybe it's just that I would rather teach 3 to 6 year olds, which I did then after that for several years till I discovered that there was such a thing as an elementary. So if we're going to try to look at this in a broad basis, I think that the whole notion of sensitive periods and planes of development says you kind of have to focus in on a certain area, or else you're going to be talking so incredibly broadly. The whole approach to infants and toddlers and the approach to elementary school kids and the approach to secondary school kids are so diverse. They're very different because the kids are different. And we can't treat them the same. Anyway, you send me what you can send me, and
Right.
I will look at that. And it worked quite a bit, by the way, with a fella named Kyle Herman. Do you know Kyle?
Yeah, Janice's husband.
Mhm.
Yeah. He is a secondary. He teaches high school Montessori, and we've mostly corresponded. He was once one of my students, and we've corresponded a lot on the issue of what does cosmic education mean to a secondary student? And so he might be somebody we could tap for one of those live sessions.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Jana is wonderful too, but he is particularly with respect, and I know you too, Tim, are involved in the secondary, but I've spoken more recently with Kyle about this.
Well, I think there's a difference between me as a theoretician for the last 50 years versus someone like Kyle who's doing it every day. I do it, I teach 1 or 2 classes a week So I definitely agree. It's not
I'm
only good to have a point of view, it's good to have your hands in the real work. Okay,
So
I'm going to
just look up Sapphire. And if this is the Sapphire we're talking about, it's a 1959 British crime drama. Is that what you were talking about, Sapphire?
It was John and Cindy who recommended it.
I
And
know, but is this it, the 1959 British crime drama? It's,
I don't know. It's called The Sapphire. It's on Netflix, I think.
yeah, I'll look it up.
Huh. I don't know anything about it, just hearing them say it was a great movie.
Okay. It says it focuses on racism in London toward immigrants from the West Indies. So I guess this is probably it. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to watch it.
Yeah.
All right, folks. I look forward to getting that from you, Tim.
All right. I'm about to call, I think, Stacy Cataldo, I believe. No, it's Colleen, sorry, Colleen Carlson, who reminds me that since I can still see and hear you, I happen to have certification experience in secondary.
There's
I know
Colleen.
I know
Colleen.
Colleen has that
Often
experience.
call Colleen.
Colleen, tell her I said hi. Everybody have a great time.
Yeah,
Talk to you.
please read her on my part too. I look forward to getting this from you, Tim, soon.
Bye,
Okay.
everyone.
Bye-bye.